You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Welcome back to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans from the West Coast. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Thursday, December 10th, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's it going, my friend?
Good. Good to talk with you, buddy.
Good to be with you, my friend. We are also joined by South Stands contributor Chad Plummer from Cleveland. CP, what's the word from the 216?
All good, man. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Cleveland, 55 degrees.
Ooh, 55. Yeah, that's like tropical weather there for this time of year.
Yeah, right?
Well, it has been another eventful week for Ohio State. For the first time since 1917, the game between Ohio State and Michigan will not be played. On Tuesday, Michigan was forced to cancel because of a COVID outbreak within its program. Reports out of Ann Arbor were that upwards of 40 players were out due to COVID infections, contact tracing, and other injuries. The cancellation, which was Ohio State's third of the season, left the Buckeyes one game short of the minimum required to qualify for the Big Ten title game. And for about 24 hours or so, we were all left wondering what, if anything, the conference would do to remedy the situation. Would they stick by their 6-game requirement and send Indiana to Indianapolis to play Northwestern for the Big Ten title, even though Ohio State beat the Hoosiers head-to-head? Would they find another opponent for the Buckeyes this Saturday to get them to that required 6th game? Or would they re-examine the rule and change it, which, as we all know by now, is what actually happened? In a statement released yesterday, the Big Ten said the decision to change the rule was, quote, based on a competitive analysis which determined that Ohio State would have advanced to the Big Ten football championship game based on its undefeated record and head-to-head victory over Indiana, regardless of a win or loss against Michigan, end quote. Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic also reported that the fact that Ohio State had 2 games canceled through no fault of their own, the Maryland and Michigan game, also weighed heavily in the Big Ten's decision to change the rule. By the way, Ohio State is the only program in the Big Ten to have multiple games canceled by their opponents because of COVID. Now, the decision, which was absolutely the right call, sorry, Indiana, you had your shot on the field against Ohio State to play your way to Indianapolis, and you didn't get it done. Even your own athletic director said as much. Sets up a December 19th clash between number 4 Ohio State and number 14 Northwestern in Lucas Oil Stadium for the Big Ten title. The game is scheduled for noon Eastern on Fox. We're going to have a look at that game for you guys next Thursday. I believe the early line on this one is Ohio State minus 20. Now, championship Saturdays are often anticlimactic, as we all know. But I don't think that's going to be the case on December 19th, boys. There are 3 very intriguing, highly impactful conference championship games happening that day that will all have a bearing on whether Ohio State ends up in the college football playoff. As we know, the ACC title game, right, is going to be between Clemson and Notre Dame. That's number 3 Clemson, number 2 Notre Dame. That's a 4 p.m. Eastern kick on ABC. That'll be followed by number 1 Alabama versus number 6 Florida in the SEC title game. That's an 8 p.m. Eastern kick on CBS. I mean, that promises to be a really, really fun day of great college football action, assuming, of course, Ohio State handles its business against Northwestern. And, of course, the College Football Playoff Committee will announce its selections the following day. That's Sunday. That's usually like a noon Eastern announcement on ESPN, so we'll look forward to that. All right, fellas, a lot to unpack here. I want to start with the cancellation of the Michigan game. For the first time in over 100 years, the Buckeyes and the Wolverines will not meet on the playing field. Paige, I want to start with you. How did you feel when you learned that the game was canceled?
I was very bummed out. I don't care that it was a 30-point line. I don't care if, it's not the rivalry that it used to be. It's a big freaking deal. And, I was thinking about it earlier. And it isn't a competitive game anymore, but that's not our fault, right? I mean, Michigan needs to live up to their end of the bargain. And the fact that they can't do it, I think, I think you had a little bit different take, right? Like, what does it matter? They're going to roll this team. It's just, it's almost like playing Minnesota. I still just think this game matters, regardless of, wins and losses. I don't think it would have been competitive, but I feel like people are discounting it because Ohio State is so dominant now. And it's just like, meh. And to me, I still think it has a ton of significant importance.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention the fact that all the drama that it created by, not getting the sixth game. And I was never concerned that, the Big Ten wouldn't, figure out a way to manipulate the system to make sure that, Ohio State gets in the championship game. That being said, it's just, I was looking forward to Saturday, and
sure.
It's disappointing, but, and then on the other hand, right, I mean, we've got to take what we can get this year.
Right.
We've had 5 games. So, it is what it is.
Yeah. A lot of fans feel the way you do, PBH. I know you're not alone in that take. Chad, what were your thoughts when you heard that the Michigan game was canceled?
I'm with Paige on this. Well, first of all, it ruined my entire week because, Saturday in the fall and, late December, early December, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Saturdays are Ohio State football for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I view a couple other games here and there, but, you take that away from me and then you take away, probably wasn't going to be competitive this year, but regardless if it was or not, I love just seeing it beat the shit out of Michigan and just looking at Harbaugh with his stupid mask covering his fucking microphone, man. I wanted to see khakis over there just shaking his head, man. But it is what it is. It just leaves a hole in my Saturday. But guess we'll just get ready for Northwestern and hopefully and see where the everything else falls out.
Yeah, I was mostly indifferent. I mean, the only sense of, I guess, disappointment or concern I felt was just over the fact that Ohio State will have one less, data point for its playoff resume. And you guys know I've been on record for a while now that Michigan is merely, in my view, Michigan is merely another stepping stone for the Buckeyes on their way to bigger goals. And with every year we continue to lower the bar for Michigan. PVH, I was reminded of our podcast last year after Ohio State's 56-27 win over Michigan in our pod to cover that game. I remember you saying that you were pretty darn impressed with the way Michigan played in the first half of that game. You were impressed with the fact that they were able to hang around for a couple of quarters. And I thought, just thinking back to that, I mean, that's where we are with this game. We've really lowered the bar for Michigan. And if they can hang around for a quarter or two in the game, we give them credit for that. You guys know the rivalry, in my view, is close to dead. In my view. Now, I'm not saying, though, that it can't be resurrected, but in order for that to happen, Michigan has to start beating Ohio State with some regularity, and the games between these two teams have to have equal stakes more often than not. It can't just be Michigan at 8-3, on its way to the Citrus Bowl, trying to play spoiler to Ohio State every year. They have to show me that they can beat a good Ohio State team when there's something of real value on the line for both schools. And I need to, I need to see Michigan take a spot in Indy away from Ohio State. I need to see them take a playoff spot away from Ohio State, like Michigan State's done a couple times to us. And, I need to see them do it more than once, actually, before I can begin to believe that this is a rivalry again. So I know that's a recycled take. You guys have heard that from me before. So I was mostly indifferent to the cancellation. And I've just also kind of become numb throughout these last 3 months to game postponements and cancellations. It's just kind of like, okay, what are you going to do? I mean, here we go again. I honestly think a 1-year break could be beneficial for the overall health of the rival. Now, we'll see if Michigan makes good use of that time off or that time away from the game. If they go out and find a different coach or they bring in, assistants or make some changes. Well, I'm not optimistic about that, but I don't know. I think a break in this rivalry is probably what it needs. I know that's not a popular take, but that's the way I feel. That's
an interesting take. I hadn't thought of that. Does it even set this rivalry back further if there was another 72-3 pasting, which, I think Ryan Day would have gleefully participated in.
Right.
Oh yeah. That shit that happened over the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. What do you say? I want to hang 100 on him or something?
Yeah. Harbaugh, Dave was like, you just mind your own business there, Jim. I'm going to hang 100 on you.
Mind your own business, Jim.
Yeah.
That's an interesting sort of angle I hadn't thought of. I don't know what they're going to change in a year, though, right? Like what's, what are they going to be able to do next year? The other interesting thing is I was curious to see if that third string quarterback was going to actually be the quarterback, right? Because there was reports that Milton's pissed off and disgruntled because he lost a starting job and the other guy was hurt. And then they were going to play that third string guy who I think is only like a 3-star player. Ugh. And you thrust him into that game. Like it might've been the first time in the history of college football where they instituted like a little league mercy rule and just called it in mid-third quarter and just said, fuck it. We can't watch this anymore.
There is that. And aside from my, being selfish, I wanted this game for us to have another, full game of figuring out a defensive backfield.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at least trying to get some of the kinks worked out there. Mm-hmm. But because we're going to play Northwestern, hopefully. Yeah. And I mean, after that, aside from practice, man, you've got your defensive. If you do a full on, like somebody has suggested, is doing a full on scrimmage this weekend in the shoe. I mean,
yeah, no, I'm with you, Chad. I think when that was my disappointment, I think was not so much that we didn't get to play Michigan, was there was a lost opportunity there for them to pick up another opportunity to impress the playoff committee, because let's face it, the resume is looking pretty flimsy at this stage, and also to work out some kinks in the secondary, as you mentioned. Now, there were some photos from practice yesterday, and Josh Proctor is actually back. So it would have been cool to see against Michigan what the defensive backfield would have looked like with the emergence of Ronnie Hickman last week. He becomes your bullet Sam, second safety. And then the assumption is that maybe Proctor becomes the starting free safety. It would have been really fun to see what the combination of those two back there would have looked like against Michigan. All right, boys. Well, I want to pull back the lens here for a moment, just to reflect on what we witnessed over the last 4 months. On August 11th, as we remember, the Big Ten canceled its season. About 5 weeks later, September the 16th, it announced a return to play plan. As we know, it was an 8+1 schedule, 9 games in 9 weeks, along with it some very strict COVID protocols, much stricter than the other major conferences. For example, a 5% team infection rate triggering a 1-week pause in team activities, 21 days for any player testing positive, 21 days out, that is, for any player testing positive. We knew when we saw that plan that it would be very tough for any team in the Big Ten to make it through unscathed. And sure enough, there have been some cancellations. The end result for Ohio State is a 5-game regular season. Now, Paige, I know you have some thoughts on how the Big Ten handled all of this, so I want to turn the floor over to you.
My little Van rant.
Yes.
Hey, look, I don't think it's, I'm with you. I don't think it's constructive to bang on the Big Ten all day long. And, I honestly, if we're being honest, I feel like Zachy boy, you're actually one of their biggest defenders. So on this point, we actually disagree.
Right.
But, simply giving, these 14 athletic directors and Commissioner Warren, a free pass on this thing is, to me, it's insane. So I do agree. We're in uncharted waters here. I go back and forth on this. Everybody's doing their best. But where I take exception is the fact that, these aren't just like conference volunteers, right? There's some regular old people working at 7-Eleven, no offense to convenience store workers, but each one of these people is getting paid 7 freaking figures, right? I mean, they're conference commissioners running departments with tens and hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. And to say that they've done a mediocre job at best and a shitty job at worst, I think is not only fair, but it's 100% accurate. So what did they do? They canceled the season prematurely. They took their sweet ass time to even get the season started up again. Then they pushed it back into mid-November, which was, 2 to 3 weeks late, when they could have started playing games, which now pushes us into this, cesspool of COVID, which everybody knew would frickin' happen, right? I mean, this wasn't rocket science. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing is they came up with all these stringent rules that to me is just, I think there's some serious reflection that needs to take place with these guys. And they also need to own up to it. I mean, the final thing that kind of drives me crazy is do we ever hear from these people? They're almost media cowards, right? I mean, they're afraid to get in front of a camera, explain their thinking and their positions. And I feel like they just need to be more transparent with what, is going on behind the scenes. So you could make the argument,
right,
okay, well, they don't owe us anything, but why, when's the last time anybody's seen Kevin Warren? I think it's just insane. So again,
where the hell is he? Does he exist? Is he real?
I mean, he is living under a rock. So, again, it doesn't make any difference. And, it's off my chest. We beat it to death on text for the last 3 days, and we can move the hell off it. And I'm not, a conspiracy theorist and, it has to be, fire and brimstone, but I think, all those points are valid. And, if you're being fair about it, the Big Ten blew this compared to how all the other conferences handle it, with the exception of the Pac-12.
Chad, what are your thoughts?
I'm on the same footprint as Van Rant on this. I just don't understand. I get when they started that they wanted to be out in the forefront and, look like we knew what the hell we were doing, the Big Ten conference and all this. And it just, I've never seen more people pissed off. Like, social media is so funny, man. I like some of these Buckeye groups that I'm in. Like, I can't even read them anymore, but I mean, just some of the funny shit out there, hashtag fire Kevin Warren. I mean, that went on and on and on and on for months, and now look where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Decisions adjustments had to be made, and that's fine. And adjustments have to be made in different scenarios all the time, but there just wasn't the 21-day protocol. I mean, what the, even when they the CDC drops it from 14 to 10, we're still at 21 days or whatever the hell it is. They're just the decisions making, and I feel there's no presence of a face of the Big Ten that's out there, discussing this. I mean, I think it's just because they would just get hazed so bad from the media that's at the presser. And, it's just a shame because people are just so salty. And so anyways, I'm not going to continue to go on, but it's just, I feel like they've got mud on their face, the Big Ten.
I understand the criticism. I guess my view on it from the very beginning was that the Big Ten's return to play plan was not just about playing football games. When I saw the plan, the message that was clear to me from the plan was that, they were going to attempt to play during this pandemic, but the Big Ten would be damned if Big Ten football is going to contribute to the spread of coronavirus. And I think that's why the 5% team infection rate and the 7.5% population infection rate, those thresholds were set very low because the Big Ten wanted all 14 programs to take mitigating the spread of the virus seriously. And the same with not allowing fans in Big Ten stadiums. The Big Ten was not going to sponsor super spreader events in their stadiums. And I actually applaud them for that because I think what the SEC and the ACC are doing right now, allowing upwards of 20,000 fans in their stadiums during the height of this pandemic, is unconscionable. So, and I also
agreed. I agree with you.
Yeah. And I had no problem with the conference waiting for rapid testing. That was a big part of the delay. That's why the rapid testing wasn't available until the end of September, early October. And then there had to be the ramp up, right? Where they had to be able to resume contact practices. And that's why the timeline was, mid to late October. That's why they started so late. I personally, and again, I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I had no problem with them taking a very cautious approach to coming back. And I know that sacrificed some games in the process, right? Like some have said that, it was hubris for the Big Ten to think it could play 9 games in 9 weeks. And I actually don't think the Big Ten ever believed that. I think the presidents and chancellors knew there would be cancellations, and I think they were just willing to live with that. But what I think hubris looks like actually is 20,000 fans in your stadium for a college football game during the height of a global pandemic. So I think placing a high priority on not allowing an amateur game played by unpaid athletes to contribute to the spread of the coronavirus is, I got no problem with that. And from a competition standpoint, the plan wasn't perfect, obviously, because playing football games was not the only priority in the plan. But in my view, it was good enough. And, if I would have told you guys on August 11th, the day the Big Ten announced that it was postponing fall sports, that today, Ohio State would be undefeated, ranked in the top 4, playing in the Big Ten title game with what? Like the playoff predictor, according to ESPN, has Ohio State like an 85% chance to make the playoff. But I told you guys that on August 11th. I mean, we would all be thrilled. I mean, even in a normal year, those are circumstances. Those are the best you could hope for as an Ohio State fan, even in a normal year. So we made it. It wasn't pretty. And I guess what I'm just grown tired of, and not so much from you, PVH, but just what I see on Twitter and a lot of the guys who run fan sites and radio personalities and stuff are still looking backward and banging on the Big Ten, and they're still pissed. And well, this would if this and this. I'm like, look, what's the problem, Buckeye fans? You're exactly where you want to be right now. You got a great chance to make the playoffs. You're in the Big Ten title game. You've got a shot at a 4th consecutive Big Ten title. So what's the point in continuing to look backward and staying pissed off that the Illinois game was canceled? Or that the Maryland game was canceled.
I agree with you.
So I agree with you. That's where I'm coming from.
Why does it take so long for him? Right. Why does it take so long for him to make a fucking decision though? Like perfect example, like this week about the cutting the 6 games. Why is it like we're just waiting on pins and needles? Like what? I just don't get it.
I didn't have a problem with the way they handled that. And if you look at all the criticism they got for was there a vote to cancel or wasn't there a vote and all that stuff. I mean, they waited until they could all assemble and have a formal vote on it. And it was just meant to be a formality. I think it was already decided, but I think they learned from the lessons earlier this summer when they decided to cancel and nobody could say whether there was a vote or not. So look, they did the right thing. They ultimately arrived at the right decision to put Ohio State in. I mean, when the next time there's a pandemic, I think the Big Ten will do this better, and in normal circumstances, I think the Big Ten actually does a pretty good job of putting on a football season. So I don't mean to sound like a Big Ten defender. I guess I just don't see, I've never understood why people are so pissed off about it, because I actually place a pretty high priority on mitigating the spread of this virus. And the Big Ten's plan for that, quite frankly, way better than the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12. Now, if you're judging the plan solely on, getting as many football games played as possible, well, right. The SEC, ACC, and Big 12, they had better plans for that.
I will tell you, Z, after having this conversation on our pod right now and having you, like, instead of over our text thread and whatnot, I actually feel a little bit better. I will say that. So you've done that for me, Z.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And you make good points. And they did pull it off. Now, I would also throw it. I wouldn't be so sure they pulled it off yet, though, right? I mean, right. all it takes is an outbreak at Northwestern. Then what the hell do you do, right? And true. I'm not so sure that, a playoff can happen. I mean, this thing is exploding, right before our eyes. So let's not start in
the immortal words of the wolf.
Of the wolf of
from
Pulp Fiction. I think everybody knows where I would normally go with this, but
let's not start sucking each other's blank just yet. Yeah. Okay, all
let's just knock on some wood.
All right,
and hope it happens.
Yeah, it's a good point. You're right. We're in the red zone as far as having pulled this off. We're not quite there yet. That's a good point. Before we end things here today, I just wanted to turn our focus back to Ohio State's playoff hopes. Now, we know that Ohio State held at number 4 in this week's playoff rankings. The committee seemed very impressed with how Ohio State performed against Michigan State. We all were very impressed. By the way, guys, I never really did get your impressions of what happened in East Lansing against Michigan State. Paige, do you want to spend a couple of minutes talking about how that game landed with you?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think it would be close. It played out kind of as how I thought it would. I just, after watching Michigan play Michigan State playing Northwestern, I was just like, how are they going to be able to score against Ohio State? And it kind of turned out that way. And should be told, when it was 28-0, I pretty much turned my attention elsewhere. So, but obviously they're working on some stuff. Some guys, got PT, which I think is a great point you guys both made about, hey, that's, it would be great to have one more game, regardless of who it might be, for them to work out some more kinks, specifically in the secondary. But they did what they needed to do. Mm-hmm. Justin Fields was a beast in that game.
He was, boy.
It's, man, if that guy's on the field, we have a chance against anybody, and it's pretty scary to watch.
How about that running down the field and making that block, dude? Yeah. That was just
on the Trey Sermon run.
That was great.
I was like, just
Yeah, that was pretty.
Yeah, I got up off the couch and I was actually kind of running down the living room like with Justin. Like this is fucking sweet.
Chad,
did you pull a hammy, dude?
little twins, bro.
Chad, what were your impressions of Ohio State's performance last week in East Lansing against Michigan State?
I was very happy, especially with seeing, believe it or not, guys on this podcast, how many times have we bashed Marcus Hooker? He actually had a couple of great plays.
Good. Yes, he was.
Yeah, he was. He was good. And it was good to see Trey Sermon have a good game, and like Ronnie Hickman, like you had mentioned earlier, Zach, I think that kid's going to be a stud. I think Paige and I were pretty close in our predictions.
Yeah.
I think I said 59-13 and Paige said 49 to something.
Yeah.
But we were both close there. But yeah, I was impressed. And, even you got to be impressed with Miller at the start. And of course that's going to happen. The kid's amped up, dude. He's not, was just thrown into that and hadn't been practicing that all week. So of course there was going to be some hiccups. Fields really saved his ass more than a handful of times by, saving the ball from being a fumble and whatnot. But, you look at some of those younger guys on the O-line, man, it was very comforting.
Yeah. My big takeaway, and I mentioned this on the pod on Sunday, was just how scary the Ohio State offense is when Justin Fields is a runner. And we've been talking all year long, guys, and we've talked about it in the preseason. Like, you got to keep bubble wrap on that guy, right? Only use him as a runner when you absolutely have to have it. Well, now every game's an elimination game, right? And he has been devastating as a runner in Ohio State's last two games. The bubble wrap is off. And I think back to the Fiesta Bowl last year when he had that big brace on his knee and wasn't able to do the things he can normally do as a runner. Imagine what a different outcome that would have been if we had this version of Justin Fields. So that's a scary dimension that we're now seeing just really kind of for the first time. He's unleashed as a runner now. And that was my big takeaway, probably my one big takeaway outside of the fact that Ohio State was shorthanded and played so well in spite of that and played their best game of the year.
I don't know about you guys, but I had to jump up for the head to the medicine cabinet, pop another anxiety pill when he went down, though.
That's right. He got hit pretty hard.
Getting the wind knocked out of him, but I was a little nerved up. I'm like, oh no, Lord, please don't let this be.
He turned out to be all right. You know who also went down in that game was Wyatt Davis in the second half. And he was interviewed earlier this week, and he said, don't worry about me. I'll be ready. And this is before the Michigan game was canceled, but he said that he was going to be ready to play in Michigan against Michigan. So he'll most certainly be available for the Big Ten title game. And boy, I really hope we get our big studs out at the tackle spots, NPF and our left tackle. Sorry, his name escapes me. Get those guys
back. Who's looking a hell of a lot more comfortable now too is number 24 back there.
Oh, Sean Wade. Sean Wade. He had a gorgeous interception in the second half, didn't he? Where he went up. Yeah.
Yes, he did.
He was good. In the third quarter, there was a moment there where it looked like we might see a little bit of a clown show. Ohio State led Michigan State. They gave up a big pass play. It was Marcus Williamson again. He gave up another long pass play, about 55 yards, that set up Michigan State's only score. Michigan State gets the ball back, and they're moving a little bit. And then Wade comes up with the big interception, and I think that was all she wrote after that point. So that was a really big moment there, because I thought otherwise it seemed like they were teetering a little bit on Michigan State maybe making things a little bit interesting, as we've seen in Ohio State's previous three games, right, where they let an inferior opponent off the mat and kind of play with them a little bit. So I was happy to see Wade shut that down.
I would have liked to see a couple of the other younger defensive backs in there as opposed to Williamson, but
I wonder what the solution is there, because they don't seem to trust anybody else. I think, Chad, the only alternative there is a true freshman with little or no playing time. And so in the eyes of the coaches, maybe that's an even bigger gamble. I'm hoping what happens now that Josh Proctor is back, we see him as the starter at free safety, Ronnie Hickman as the starter, as that second, well, not the starter, but he comes in as the second safety in the bullet Sam. In other words, filling the role that Proctor has. And maybe that helps things on the back end. I worry we might just be stuck with Williamson at slot corner. All right. So Ohio State holds at number 4 in this week's rankings. Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson at 1, 2, and 3. They stay right where they were. Texas A&M is at 5, right behind Ohio State. Now, Texas A&M's game this week against Ole Miss was also canceled. So Texas A&M is not going to have an opportunity to make up any ground on Ohio State, who's not playing. So that's good news for Ohio State. Guys, I think looking at this, short of Ohio State losing to Northwestern in the Big Ten title game, of course, really that one doomsday scenario that we talked about a couple weeks ago, that's the only thing that seems to be the one scenario that can keep Ohio State at the playoffs, I think, which is Florida beating Bama in a close game and Clemson beating Notre Dame in a close game, the committee being very impressed with all 4 of those teams as one-loss teams. Do we still feel that that is the doomsday scenario for Ohio State? Paige, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And let's not forget, I mean, we probably want to talk about this on next Thursday when we look at these games, but, Bama had some rough defensive outings earlier in the season.
Yeah, they did.
So I don't think this is, by any means, a slam dunk for Alabama to win that game. I mean, they'll be favored and, it might be around, I would say around 10 or something like that. But it's not out of the realm of possibility for Florida to win that game. Mm-hmm. So, and this is the other thing. What time is the kick for us next week?
We've got a noon Eastern kick. So unlike previous Big Ten title games that are played in prime time, this one's going to be played. Well, it'll be 9 a.m. my time here on the West Coast. I think 10 a.m. for you, PVH.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I don't hate. I don't hate. I kind of like not having to wait around all day long for Ohio State to play. It's a welcome change for me. I don't know. You prefer the night games, I assume.
I do. Yeah. But, that there might be some advantages in that game. We're definitely going to need the Cardell Wisconsin version versus the JT Northwestern version of the championship game. They need to make an impression in this game.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. And so, especially if there's a doomsday scenario later on that evening, because I wouldn't just say it's a foregone conclusion that Bama rolls Florida. Their defense has looked suspect at times, and Florida's a good team.
Yeah. Chad, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with Paige. I'm super stoked for that Clemson Notre Dame game, though.
That's going to be a fun one.
I'm anxious to see. Yeah. I'm usually a big, I'm not a fan of Notre Dame whatsoever. I mean, literally, I can't stand Notre Dame.
Right.
They haven't been relevant since the 90s, but I think this team is probably the best team they've had probably since the 90s.
Yeah.
So, because that Book kid, he's smart. He's a gamer. He doesn't make mistakes. Their defense is solid.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what Clemson's all about with the Lawrence. You know what I mean? That was the one. I mean, that was a factor in that game, but we'll see. I mean, Notre Dame is an elite and an actual contender for the national championship. So
there's another scenario I'm thinking about. What if Clemson blows the doors off Notre Dame? What if, at full strength? Now, remember, it wasn't just Trevor Lawrence they were missing for that game in South Bend. They were missing 3 key defensive starters, including Skalski, their starting middle linebacker, I think is probably their best player. And then they also had another starting defensive end who had to sit out the entire first half because of a targeting penalty from the week before. So what if Clemson at full strength on a neutral field runs Notre Dame off the field? And you got Notre Dame sitting there at 1 loss. I think that makes it a more difficult conversation for the committee, because then now you're looking at that win over Clemson through a different light, through a different prism, right? Like, hey, maybe they got that win because Clemson was shorthanded, and now, they get run off the field and on a neutral field. Maybe Ohio State still gets in that scenario. Paige, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually have a thought on that, but I'm going to save it for the prediction pod, because I actually thought of that same scenario.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah, that's a nice teaser. I like it.
Yeah, but that's It could definitely happen. I don't think so, but it could definitely happen.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I agree that is still a doomsday scenario. Two very close, fun games in the SEC and ACC title games where both teams in each game look very impressive. Good quarterback play, good defense, big time playmaking. Both those teams come out. You got 4 one-loss teams sitting there ahead of Ohio State, all having played, 9 or 10 games, so significantly more games than Ohio State. That's a scenario I don't think Buckeye fans want to see. We can explore that a little bit more when we have a look at Northwestern and the Big Ten title game next week. Guys, we'll shoot for Thursday, I think, if that works for you. And unless you guys have anything else to say, I thought we could wrap it up here, and we'll reconvene on Thursday of next week. You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.